Hi, I am Christina Knapp, and I am an Operations Coordinator for GuideStar Clinical Trials Management. I work with our partner hospitals to help ensure the clinical research program runs smoothly. Part of this responsibility involves the constant communication with institutional review boards, also known as IRBs, which are tasked with overseeing the conduct of clinical research studies to ensure human subjects are protected. Community hospitals and academic medical centers more and more are turning to external IRBs for efficiency and compliance. It may be beneficial for your hospital to explore the use of an external IRB. This webinar will help you understand what you need to know in making such a decision, as well as provide tips and best practices for working with an external IRB. In this webinar, I will discuss what an IRB is and what are its responsibilities. What are the differences between an internal and an external IRB, and why would a hospital choose an external IRB? Finally, once the decision is made to work with an external IRB, how are the roles and responsibilities distributed between the IRB and the hospital? So, what is an institutional review board? An IRB is a committee charged with assuring that research involving human subjects is ethical, equitable, and humane. Before a clinical trial can begin at a hospital, the study must be reviewed by an IRB. During this initial review, the IRB will consider whether the benefits of the proposed study outweigh the risk in human subjects. Based on this evaluation, the IRB may approve or deny the activation of the study, or may require changes to the study protocol before it may be activated. An internal IRB is one that has been formed within a healthcare organization to review any research conducted at an institution. An external IRB, which can be referred to as a central or commercial IRB, is an outside entity that works with many hospitals and research centers across the country to review any research involving humans. It is also common for clinical trial sponsors, such as pharmaceutical and medical device companies, to request all of the sites conducting a certain clinical trial to use the same external IRB. This setup is seen as a more efficient review process, as the external IRB only needs to review hospital-specific materials since the clinical trial protocol has already been reviewed and approved by the same IRB for many sites. So, as a hospital conducting clinical research, you may have found yourself choosing between an internal IRB and an external IRB. Concerns may be raised during this evaluation about the details of working with an external IRB, but many are easily addressed, including: what is the feasibility of working with multiple external IRBs? The impact of IRB payments diverted to an external IRB, and how to transition and outline responsibilities that will stay with the institution versus the external IRB. Depending on the studies and sponsors you've worked with, your hospital may already be working with multiple IRBs. This requires knowledge of multiple forms, reporting requirements, and/or electronic systems for study submissions. If the hospital is hesitant to work with a different IRB for every trial, a few external IRBs may be selected and used as the hospital's IRBs of record. Another factor to consider is how your hospital will be reimbursed for initial study activities that may have normally taken place within the internal IRB, such as reviewing conflict of interest prior to study initiation. This time and effort can be recouped within an administrative startup fee added to the trial budget. While the IRB payments for study review will now be directed toward an external IRB, the institution will save time and resources that would have otherwise been devoted to the internal IRB and processes. Finally, how a hospital will delineate and shift responsibilities to an external IRB is a topic of consideration. Points such as what purview over the study will the institution maintain and what will be the responsibility of the external IRB is important to understand. If your hospital is transitioning from an internal IRB to an external, there will likely be a learning curve to the new IRB methods. However, having a sound plan and outline of responsibilities will aid in this transition. The following slides will go into greater detail concerning responsibilities of the two entities. If your hospital has evaluated using an internal versus an external IRB and has made the decision to go with an external IRB, it is important to understand the responsibilities that will remain within your hospital and those that will shift to the external IRB. To begin, the hospital and the external IRB should establish a working relationship. As such, an IRB authorization agreement should be executed, which defines the roles and timeframes for reporting to trial sponsors, state, and federal agencies. In this, outline the expectations, including regulatory requirements, sharing of information between the hospital and the IRB, and a process for determining corrective and remedial actions in the event of noncompliance. Further, develop a communication plan for sharing information about the site, the investigators, the sponsor, and the actual clinical trial between the hospital and the IRB, and identify a process for responding to participant concerns and grievances, including coordination of communication with subjects. While there are many responsibilities shared between the hospital and the IRB, there are other requirements that are the sole duty of the IRB. The IRB alone is responsible for ensuring the clinical trial meets generally accepted ethical standards of human subjects protections and complies with applicable regulations, collect, review, and take into account site-specific information provided by the individual hospitals, such as special considerations regarding local populations, state laws, and any restrictions placed on clinical trials by the institution. Review and approve the informed consent and any other research-related documents or media. Provide the hospital with copies of IRB approval documents and notify the institution in writing of serious or continuing noncompliance involving risks to subjects or others. While the external IRB assumes many responsibilities of the study review process, the hospital must still review the study plan and remain vigilant about the regulations surrounding their research program in general. It may be beneficial to your hospital to assign someone within the institution, typically a compliance officer, with these duties. When it comes to study-specific responsibilities, the hospital is responsible for designating an IRB of record for the protocol, obtaining IRB approval of all research involving human subjects, conducting conflict of interest review, and notifying the IRB of record promptly in writing of serious or continuing noncompliance or unanticipated problems involving risks to subjects or others. General research program requirements that remain with the hospital include maintaining an education and training program for investigators and research staff, maintaining policies and procedures for the conduct of human subjects research, maintaining appropriate institution-specific required credentialing of staff, maintaining approved federal-wide assurances if the hospital conducts federally funded research, maintaining institutional mechanisms for permitting the use and disclosure of protected health information, or PHI, for clinical trials to remain compliant with HIPAA, and ensuring that the investigator is conducting research and recruiting potential research participants in accordance with the IRB-approved protocol, procedures, and documents. As evidenced, there are many important considerations to evaluate when your hospital is choosing whether to work with an internal or external IRB model. In the end, it is important to remain educated on the responsibilities of an IRB and how those responsibilities shift when a hospital is working with an external IRB. Thank you for your time today to learn more about working with external IRBs. I hope that this webinar will prove beneficial if your hospital is considering working with an external IRB. GuideStar Clinical Trials Management works with hospitals and health systems around the country to build, manage, and support clinical research programs. From helping hospitals incorporate a clinical trial strategy to actually managing the research operation through a co-sourced model, our service delivery is based on operational and financial best practices to ensure optimal results for research programs.